The girl was maybe 8 years old, and she was standing in the middle of the crosswalk on Bloor Street, holding a cardboard sign above her head with both hands, and the sign said, "Mr. Stop." Nobody stopped. The light had already turned green. The cars behind the first row began to honk. A woman on a bicycle swerved around the girl without looking at her. A man in a gray parka stepped off the curb and then stepped back. And in the middle of all of it, standing at the edge of the crosswalk where the sidewalk met the street, was a man who did not know that the light had changed. He was tall, and he wore a dark wool coat that had been expensive once and was still expensive now, just quieter about it. He carried a briefcase in his left hand and a white cane in his right, and the cane was moving in short arcs across the pavement, in front of him, the way a hand moves when it is reading something in the dark. His name was Bernard Atchison, and he was 61 years old, and he had been a senior partner at a commercial litigation firm on Bay Street for 22 years, and he had been blind for 4. He did not hear the sign. He heard the girl. "Mister," she said. "Mister, don't." He stopped. The girl crossed to him in 4 steps. She was wearing a coat that was too big for her. Men's, brown corduroy. The sleeves pushed up to her elbows even in October, and her hair was in 2 braids that had started the day neat and were now coming apart at the ends. She put her hand on his arm. Not grabbing, just placing it there, the way you'd place a stone to hold a piece of paper down. "There's a truck," she said. A moment later, a transport truck moved through the intersection. It was not speeding. It was not swerving. It was simply large, and it was there, and Bernard had been 3 steps from walking into it. He felt the air move. He stood very still. "Thank you," he said. He said it the way people say things when they don't yet understand what they are saying. The girl did not let go of his arm. "Where are you going?" she asked. He told her, the corner of Bloor and Spadina, where his office building was. The girl said she knew where that was. She said it the way someone says they know where a place is when they have spent time near it without ever going inside. "I can take you," she said. Bernard Atchison was not a man who accepted help easily. He had spent 4 years learning not to need it, or at least learning to arrange things so that the need was invisible. He had a car service. He had a building concierge who watched for him in the mornings. He had a system for the sidewalk that involved counting steps and noting landmarks he could hear. The sound of the parking garage fan on St. George, the smell of the coffee kiosk at the corner of Huron, and the system was good, and the system had mostly worked. It had not worked today. "All right," he said. They walked together. The girl matched his pace, which was not slow. She said, "Step up before curbs and puddle, left before puddles," and once she said, "There's a dog," and paused just long enough for him to hear the clicking of nails on concrete before the owner pulled it out of the way. "You're good at this," he said. "My grandmother is blind," she said, "in one eye. The other one is going, 'I'm sorry.' She says sorry is for people who did something wrong." Bernard said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Your grandmother sounds like a sensible woman." "She says that too," the girl said. He almost smiled. At the corner of Bloor and Spadina, they stopped. Bernard could hear the revolving door of his building 40 feet ahead, the low hump of pressurized air, the lobby music, the security guard who always said morning, Mr. Atchison, even in the afternoon. "This is you," the girl said. "Yes," he paused. "What's your name?" "Petra," she said. Then, after a moment, "Holloway." "Petra Holloway." "Bernard Atchison." He reached out and she shook his hand. Her grip was firm in the way that children's grips are firm when an adult has taught them that handshakes matter. "Can I ask you something, Petra Holloway?" "Okay. Why were you standing in the crosswalk with a sign?" A beat of silence. "I saw you yesterday," she said, "standing at that corner, waiting. The light changed 4 times and you didn't go because of the trucks. You kept waiting, I thought." She stopped. "I thought maybe today you'd need someone to wait with you." Bernard did not say anything right away. The revolving door whooshed. A courier on a bike called out and someone called back. Somewhere above them a window was open and someone inside was playing the radio, an old country song Bernard half recognized, something about a river. "You came back today," he said. "For me. I live close." "Where?" Another pause. Shorter this time. "Around," she said. He thought about that word. Around. He had heard that word from witnesses on the stand. He had heard it from junior associates who had not done their research. He had heard it from his own daughter 3 years ago when he asked her how things were going. Around was a word people used when the real answer was something they were not sure they were allowed to say. "Petra," he said carefully, "do you have somewhere to be right now?" "Not really." "Are you hungry?" The pause this time was the longest yet. "A little," she said. There was a diner on the next block. Bernard had been going there since before his sight went. A plain place, the kind with laminated menus and coffee that came in ceramic mugs, and a counter where the same 3 people sat every morning and argued about the maple leaves. The owner knew him. He could navigate it without help. "There's a place on Balmuto," he said. "Will you come?" Petra Holloway looked at him. She was 8 years old, and she had learned to be careful about invitations. The same way, she had learned to be careful about shortcuts and about men who asked questions, and about generosity that came with something attached to the bottom of it, like a hook inside a piece of bread. But she had also learned, from her grandmother, mostly, that some things were worth the risk of being wrong. "Okay," she said. They sat in a booth by the window. Bernard ordered coffee and a toasted sandwich he mostly didn't eat because he was listening too hard to eat. Petra ordered hot chocolate and a grilled cheese and ate half the grilled cheese and put the other half in the pocket of the corduroy coat without asking and without explaining, and Bernard noticed by the sound of the wax paper and said nothing. He asked her about school. She said she hadn't been in a while. He asked her about her grandmother. She said her grandmother was at a place on Dundas where they help people, but it was full a lot of the time. And you had to leave in the morning and come back in the evening. And sometimes there wasn't space, and you had to find somewhere else to go. She said this the way she might have said sometimes the cafeteria runs out of chocolate milk. A thing that happened, a thing you worked around. Bernard set down his coffee. "And you?" he asked. "Where do you go when there isn't space?" Petra turned the mug of hot chocolate around in her hands. The mug was too big for her hands. She was doing it for something to do. "Around," she said again. This time Bernard did not push the word. He let it sit between them on the table, and the table held it, and neither of them looked at it directly. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said instead, and Petra did. She talked about her grandmother the way you talk about someone who is the whole of your map, the person by whom every other person and place and experience is oriented. Her grandmother's name was Odette. She had come from Montreal when Petra was a baby, and she could make soup from almost nothing, and she knew every bus route in the city from memory, and she used to sing before her lungs got bad, old songs in French that Petra didn't understand the words to, but knew by sound the way you know a smell. "She taught me the crosswalk thing," Petra said. "She said you always watch for the people who are waiting too long. She said the city moves fast, and some people need someone to notice that they're still standing there." Bernard was quiet for a long time after that. When the bill came, he paid it. Outside on the sidewalk, the afternoon had turned gray and the temperature had dropped, and the wind was coming in off the lake the way it always did in October, that particular Toronto cold that was wet at the edges. "I need to ask you something," Bernard said, "and I need you to answer me honestly." Petra waited. "Where did you sleep last night?" The wind moved between them. "A doorway on Nassau," she said. "There's a vent. It's warm." Bernard Atchison had argued cases before the Court of Appeal. He had cross-examined expert witnesses for 6 hours without stopping. He had sat across a table from some of the most composed, strategic, difficult people and held his position in the country, and held his position without flinching. He had believed for most of his adult life that composure was a form of respect, that keeping your face still was how you showed someone you were taking them seriously. His face was not still now. "How long?" he said. "A while, and your grandmother, the place on Dundas, they know about you?" "She tells them I'm with someone." "Are you?" Petra looked at him. "I was," she said, "and then I wasn't." He didn't ask much more than that. She didn't offer more than that. But something passed between them anyway. The outline of a story that he didn't need the details of to understand. Because he had spent enough of his life learning that the shape of a loss is readable even when the particulars are private. "I have a building," he said. "It came out strangely, the way things come out when you decide them at the same moment you say them. There's a spare room. It's been spare for a long time. I use it it was going to be a study, and then it wasn't anything. And I have a woman who comes in the mornings, Rosalind. She helps me with things in the house, and she has a daughter about your age. She's brought her on weekends sometimes, and she would—" He stopped. He was making it complicated. He was making it a legal argument when it did not need to be a legal argument. He was doing what he always did, which was to build a structure around the thing he was actually trying to say, so that the thing itself didn't have to stand in the open. "Petra," he said, "I would like you to be safe." She stared at him. She was 8 years old, and she had a grilled cheese sandwich in her pocket, and her grandmother's voice in her head saying, "Watch for the people who are still standing there, and now, this man, this tall, careful, quiet man who had almost walked into a transport truck and who had not said sorry when she told him. Sorry was for people who did wrong. This man was looking at her, or looking in her direction, and what he was looking at was not a problem to be solved or a situation to be managed, but simply her, Petra Holloway, who had stood in a crosswalk with a cardboard sign. "Okay," she said, very small. The building on Madison Avenue was old in the good way, high ceilings and tall windows, and a radiator in every room that clicked and sighed through the night. That. Rosalind arrived the next morning and found them at the kitchen table, Bernard with his coffee and Petra with her hot chocolate and a piece of toast she had made herself, because she had asked where the bread was, and he had told her, and she had done it without anyone helping her, and this had seemed to please them both. Rosalind stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the two of them. "Mr. Acheson," she said. "Good morning, Rosalind. Who is this?" "This is Petra Holloway." "Petra, this is Rosalind." Petra said hello. Rosalind said hello back, and then she looked at Bernard, and then she looked at Petra again, and then she went to the kettle and put it on and did not say anything else right away, which was, Bernard had come to understand. How Rosalind processed things she was still deciding what to feel about. By mid-morning she had decided. "She can't keep wearing that coat," Rosalind said to Bernard quietly in the hallway. "It's 4 sizes too big and it smells like the street." "I know," Bernard said. "And she needs to see someone from the school board. There are people who do this. There's a process." "I know," Bernard said. "Mr. Acheson." Rosalind stopped. "Where did she come from?" "A crosswalk on Bloor," he said. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. "The truck," she said. He nodded. She was quiet for another moment. Then she went back to the kitchen. "There were people called?" "And there were forms, and there were meetings with a very tired woman from the city who carried a heavy bag and spoke to Petra with the careful, patient tone of someone who had learned to be careful and patient because the children she spoke to had reasons to be wary of adults who were not. Petra was wary. She sat in the chair in Bernard's living room and answered the questions, and some of them she answered fully, and some of them she answered partially, and some she just looked at until the woman moved on. And Bernard sat across the room, not intervening, just present, so that Petra would know where he was. Odette was found. She was at a different shelter than the one on Dundas. She had been moved 3 weeks earlier when a new arrangement opened up, and she had told them she had family, that Petra was with family, which was what she had hoped would become true, because Odette was a woman who understood, better than most people, that the things you hope for are sometimes the things you have to say out loud first, before they can become real. When Bernard met Odette, she came to the building on Madison Avenue and sat in the same chair the city woman had sat in, and looked around at the room with the eye that still worked. "You're the blind lawyer," she said to him. "Yes," he said. "Petra told me." She paused. "She said you almost walked into a truck." "Yes," she said, "you were very calm about it." "I wasn't," he said. "I was terrified. I just couldn't think of anything useful to do with that right away." Odette considered this. "That," she said, "is what she said you'd say." Bernard laughed. It was the kind of laugh that surprises a person, the kind that comes up before you have a chance to decide whether this is a laughing situation. Odette smiled, just a little. The way someone smiles when they have been hoping a thing and the thing has arrived. The months move the way months do. Rosalind found a coat for Petra, a proper one, red wool, with buttons, and Petra wore it, and also kept the corduroy one folded at the top of the closet, and nobody mentioned this. A school was found. The process was slow and involved more forms and more tired adults with heavy bags, but eventually it worked. The way things in this city eventually worked if someone kept showing up to the meetings and asking the right questions, which was a thing Bernard Acheson knew how to do. Odette came for dinners. She and Bernard played cards on Saturday afternoons, a game she had learned in Montreal that he learned the rules of badly and played with great confidence, which she tolerated with visible amusement. Petra did her homework on the kitchen table, and sometimes asked Bernard about words she didn't know, and he told her what they meant, and sometimes told her where they came from, which she had not asked, but which she seemed to find useful. One evening in February, she came to the doorway of his study. He was at the desk, reading with his fingers, the braille reader making its quiet sound, and she stood there without coming in, which he knew because he heard her breathing and her footsteps had stopped. "Bernard," she said. "Yes. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." A pause. "Were you scared that day, at the corner?" He thought about lying the way adults lie to children to give them the impression that adults are steadier than they are. He thought about it and did not do it. "Yes," he said. "I was scared that morning. I'd been scared for a while. There's a—" He stopped. Started again. "When you lose something you relied on, you spend a long time figuring out how to move through the world without it. And sometimes the moving is fine, and you have a system, and the system krupa. And sometimes the system doesn't work, and you're standing at a corner and you've been there for 5 minutes and you can't tell if it's safe and you don't know how to ask." Petra was quiet. "I was scared," he said again. "And then you were there." "I had a cardboard sign," she said. "It was a very good sign." She almost laughed. "Not quite. Almost. Good night," she said. "Good night, Petra." He listened to her footsteps go down the hall and heard the small sound of her door, and then the building was quiet except for the radiator, doing what it had always done, clicking and sighing in the cold. On his desk, there was a photograph he couldn't see. His daughter had put it there 2 years ago. She had visited for a weekend, one of her harder visits, both of them trying to find the shape of a relationship that had gotten strange in the years after his diagnosis. She had brought the photo and set it down and said, "I thought you might like having it here." He had asked her to describe it. She had said it was the two of them on the dock. At the cottage in Muskoka the summer before everything changed. Bernard with his hand above his eyes against the sun. She had said, "You look happy in it. Both of us do." He had left it there. He couldn't see it, and so in a way it was entirely for someone else, and he liked that. He liked the idea that it was there for anyone who came into the room and needed to see a person looking happy once. In March, Petra's teacher sent a note home. The note said that Petra had written an essay about someone she admired. The essay was about her grandmother. It talked about bus routes and soup and old songs in French and one other thing which the teacher had underlined. She taught me that some people need someone to notice they're still standing there, so I try to notice. Bernard had Rosalind read the note to him twice. The second time, he asked her to stop at that line. He sat with it for a while. Outside, the city was doing what Toronto does in March, still cold but starting to negotiate, gray sky but longer light, the snow pulling back from the curbs and the first crows appearing on the phone lines as though they had been sent ahead to see if it was safe. Bernard could hear the street from where he was sitting. He could hear the bus on Madison, and the sound of someone's ice breaking up in the eavesdrow, and further away, barely, the particular low sound of traffic on Bloor that meant the light had changed and people were moving. He stood up. He got his coat from the hook by the door. He picked up his cane. He did not need to be anywhere. That was the thing. He was not going to his office, and he was not going to the diner on Balmuto, and there was no meeting, no filing, no call. He was just going to walk to the end of the block and stand at the corner and listen to the city, which was something he had not done in a long time without a destination attached to it. At the corner, a woman asked him if he needed help crossing. He said, "No, thank you. I'm just standing here for a minute." She said, "Okay," and moved on. He stood there. The light changed. Cars moved. Somewhere close by, someone was laughing on a phone call. A child was asking a question in a voice he couldn't quite make out, something with a Y in it, and an adult was answering patiently, which meant the answer was probably because that's how it works, or because I said so, or maybe something better than either of those. The cold came in off the lake. Bernard Atchison stood at the corner of Madison and Bloor and let it. He was not waiting to cross. He was not waiting for anything in particular. He was just a man standing at a corner, in the middle of a city, in the middle of winter becoming spring. And the city moved around him the way it had always moved, indifferent and loud and full of people who were somewhere between where they had been and where they were going, and not all of them, he knew now, were afraid of standing still.